But what I want to tell you is that Shawnee took on this project because the subject matter was of extreme interest to her, and she wanted to create a work of art, and what she ended up doing was creating the bridge, and that in itself I thought was a beautiful thing. But on top of that, what has happened as a result of this, the dialogue that is coming out of this, and the movement towards recreating a space and a connection to communities, this is exactly what we were hoping would come out of an exhibition like this. So that's how I'm going to start. I'm going to let the event roll. Shawnee's going to set everything in motion. I do want to thank our community partners, Elizabeth Baptist Church, Pastor Gibson, thank you so much, and our other community partners, Burton Valcar and Slavic Village Development. So thank you so much, and here we go.
Hi, I'm Shawnee. I'm one of the 12 artists part of the Crossroad exhibition, Still We Rise. Robinson is a curator, and I'm really happy and excited to have this opportunity to connect to communities and share stories. I just wanted to mention the artists: Lawrence Baker, Donald Black Jr., Marcus Brathwaite, Gwen Garth, Amanda King, Hilton Murray, who's also in Slavic Village with me, Ed Parker, Vince Robinson, Charmaine Spencer, Gina Washington, Gary Williams. And we're in 6 neighborhoods. You download the Fourth Wall app, and you can go to the sites and view the artwork. In Buckeye, East Cleveland, Central, Glenville, Kingsman, and Slavic Village. At the start of this project, we just met over Zoom, and it was the height of the COVID epidemic. So it was difficult connecting with the community for me in the beginning. But connecting with Slavic Village Development, I met Joe and Lynn and Hilton, and we all got a tour of Slavic Village Development, and they're a wonderful community organization that does a lot of things in Slavic Village. They can explain more about that, but I met Chris that day, and he told me about Pastor Gibson, and I only met Pastor Gibson once when I came to bring a flyer, but he made an impression on me, and Miss Moore Walker, and he told me, Chris told me that there's been years of them working to get Sidaway Bridge back up and running, and he told me that I should reach out to Pastor Gibson, and the ball started rolling. I started meeting all these awesome community organizers that are working so hard to make Slavic Village and Kingsman and Cleveland better. But I was fascinated with the bridge. I'm going to just read my statement because that's easier for me. I decided to pick Sidaway Bridge as my site because sometimes during the Huff riots in 1966, the bridge was vandalized. Some of the wooden planks of the walkway were removed, and a fire was set on the Slavic Village side of the bridge so no one on the Kingsman side of the bridge could enter again. The boards were never repaired or replaced. The bridge was just left in disrepair and neglect for the past 55 years. The bridge is important to me because it reflects the elephant in the room that no one wants to acknowledge. The elephant representing how America was built on the system of slavery. And this system is still reflected in the land today. In 1976, the federal district court judge Frank Battisti, in the course of issuing his busing order to desegregate Cleveland Public Schools, he cited the closing of the Sidaway Bridge as evidence that the city and the school officials have worked in consort to segregate the schools. I hope that my artwork shines a light on the Sidaway Bridge by acknowledging its history and its power to bridge divides and connect communities. By restoring it, we can move forward and change the system. I'd like to now introduce Pastor Gibson and Bianca Butts from Burton Bell Carr, and Chris Alvarado from Slavic Village Development. So today we're going to talk about restoring Sidaway Bridge in Kingsman and their journey with how they've been going about that. So I just want to say real quick, thank you so much, Pastor Gibson, for hosting us. And thank you, Mark and Teresa and Latoya, everybody that's helping with this event. I just really appreciate it. And now I will pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Shani. So the format this evening is, with Shani's presentation, we're going to give, each of us will give some brief background information, and then there will be some questions. There will be some questions that Shani or Grace will present to us, and then we want questions from everyone else as well. And so thank you, Grace, for the Sculpture Center, because as we think about institutions of art, we don't normally think about them in a way that's active in the community like this and literally building bridges. And so thank you for being innovative in your approach and helping us to bring us together. Thank you, Shani, for your artwork and selecting this neighborhood. We're honored and thrilled that you chose to be with us here. I also want to thank each one of you here today for coming out today. Thank you for taking your time. There are a number of people who are joining us online, so it's on Facebook and Zoom and YouTube, and so grateful for those who have joined us. We're supposed to give a little bit of our background, but I'm going to actually kind of dispense with that. Here's where I want to begin. I want to begin with maybe orienting us for where we are. And so there's some people who are sitting in the audience who could do much better than I could because you've been here for many decades. So we're in the Hyacinth neighborhood. The Hyacinth neighborhood is absolutely special. It's special that I would begin with, it's special first because of the residents. The residents here are incredible. We came here about 10 years ago. So my first time really being in Slavic Village, I came here in the fall, maybe 11, 12 years ago, and I stood here by myself right behind those buildings, and I was struck by the beauty of this area. At that time, it wasn't necessarily so beautiful because we had 2 abandoned buildings here, and all these buildings were shuttered up, but I could see the beauty. So just trust me, I could see the beauty that day. The residents here are incredible. There is a commitment. There is a commitment of the residents, those who have stayed here, those who have come here more recently. There's a commitment to make this the very best neighborhood. And that's the only way I can state it. The residents are here, don't want this to be the second best neighborhood, but want it to be the best neighborhood. The other thing that's unique about Hyacinth, so you have people who've been residents for a long time. The building just in the back is called Hyacinth Lofts. A lot of young people there. And so there's a range of residents here as well. What I also like about Hyacinth is part of Slavic Village. This is a community that is built on partnerships. The partnerships, and so just last week, one of the block club groups was here in this building. I see the McDonald's here, and there was a presentation on Kingsbury Run. And so I know that Latoya Ellington, who is part of EBC, and so there is this, There's a community garden behind us. And so there are lots and lots of examples. And so one of the things that's unique about Hyacinth and Slavic Village, you have strong, committed residents and lots of partnerships. I want to just say two other things about this area. So when I first came here and I stood there, even though this was shuttered, I knew that there were strong assets. There's strong community assets in Hyacinth and Slavic Village. And so this was an asset that needed to be renovated and repurposed in some respects. But I knew this was an asset. But, you know, sometimes people don't know that there's a waterfall. There's a waterfall in the city of Cleveland, in Slavic Village. And whenever somebody comes here, like I always try to take them to Mill Creek to see the waterfall. We have members of our congregation that I have sometimes, let's say, hey, let's get in the car. We're having this serious conversation. Let's go to the waterfall. They're like, what waterfall? We go there, and no matter how intense the conversation has been, they're calmed. But the other asset that's here, in addition to the people in Mill Creek, is Sidaway Bridge. It's an incredible asset. It's an incredible asset, and it has meaning. It has meaning, and the restoration of that bridge is important not only for the physical bridge building, but for the emotional, and I would also say spiritual renovation of our community. So I'm excited. The last thing I would say is there's tremendous talent in this community. And so we have assets like Third Federal, the Boys and Girls Club, and there are assets and there's talent here. And so all of those things combined provide a wonderful equation for success.
Hi there, is this on? Oh, here we go. Hi there. Thank you, Pastor Gibson. So I'm Chris Alvarado, Executive Director at Slavic Village Development. I've been here in the neighborhood for over 7 years now. Unlike Pastor Gibson, I'm going to actually start by talking about myself, which is one of my favorite subjects, if you ask any of my friends. So I didn't grow up here in Cleveland. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. And I came here in the mid-90s out of college, and I lived over by Shaker Square off of Larchmere, so East 127th and Larchmere in the mid-90s. And I didn't have a car back then, so I would take the Rapid or the bus wherever I wanted to go, and I would take the Rapid into downtown. And if you sit on the left side of the Rapid and you look to your left before you get to the East 55th Street Rapid Station, you'll see the bridge. And I was amazed by this, and I never saw anybody go over the bridge. Now granted, you're going past fairly quickly, but I went by often enough to know that folks weren't walking across that. I also noticed a couple of things, mainly from where I lived. So Larchmere, you know, back then was still very much a Polish neighborhood. Not a Polish neighborhood, pardon me, a Hungarian neighborhood. And it was becoming more and more an African-American neighborhood. And you had folks living side by side. You had the older Hungarian neighbors who've been there for generations. Newer residents coming in, mainly families coming in. And it was something beautiful to see everybody out on the porches, talking to each other. And you could also feel the tension underneath that. And that experience that I had there near Shaker Square was something that led me to be interested in urban planning, interested in spaces like the Sidaway Bridge and like Mill Creek Falls. Back then, you couldn't get there. I mean, you could get there, but it was behind a factory. There was a metal shop right there. This was before Metro Parks came in and opened it up and cleaned it up and made it so that you could visit it. And so one of the favorite things that urban planning students would do is find spaces that had been abandoned. Beautiful spaces that you knew were loved at one point by somebody and that felt neglected. And so Mill Creek Falls was one of those spaces. Sidaway Bridge was another of those spaces. And it didn't take much to discover the pain underneath that bridge and on both sides of that bridge. I talked a little bit about living in Larchmere at the time because that neighborhood then is very much what Broadway Slavic Village and all the different little neighborhoods that constitute Broadway Slavic Village, including Hyacinth, right here where we live, are like now. We're very proud of the fact that the neighborhood looks like the city of Cleveland as a whole. But this is one of the very few diverse neighborhoods in Cleveland, and it's something that we want to preserve and honor those families that stayed for many generations through all the changes. Through the changes that precipitated the act of violence cast on the bridge and cast on our respective communities back when this was almost exclusively a Polish neighborhood in the 60s, and back when Kinsman and Garden Valley were exclusively black neighborhoods back at that time. We also want to honor those who came to this neighborhood and who fought to make this their own space where they could raise their kids and their families and stay and thrive amidst all the tumult, especially tumult over the last 12 years or so. And so this bridge is important to us because it doesn't just talk about the pain that all these folks went through back then that we still experience now, but it's a sign of hope, of our ability to be able to connect with each other again. And it's a sign of what we see taking place every single day among our neighbors who are building those bridges together with each other, despite all of the signals that we get that we shouldn't try so hard to remember the past and honor what we've got now and what we can have in the future. So we're looking forward to being able to do the same thing that we did with Mill Creek Falls, to rediscover it, to open it back up again, to invest in it, and to make it a community asset for all of our neighborhoods. I'll pass this on to my friend and colleague Bianca.
Check. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bianca Butts. I'm the Neighborhood Services Coordinator for Burtonville Park Development. That means I do a lot of engagement work, and I also have the privilege of tackling some of our environmental projects. I'm proud and happy to be inheriting that work in the neighborhoods of Central, Kinsman, and Buckeye, or Greater Buckeye, which is inclusive of Larchmere, Ludlow, Woodhill, Chalk, and Shaker Square. I say all those different pockets of our neighborhoods intentionally. Like Chris alluded to, Slavic Village is comprised of a lot of different nodes of neighborhoods that make up one community, and our service area is the same. We've been servicing in Central and Kinsman for 30 years, but over the past, maybe call it 2 generously, we've expanded our support to the Buckeye area, all those different nodes that I named. And with that total service area, that's a lot of different personalities, a lot of different demographics, but there's also a lot of commonalities. And those commonalities are things that we like to leverage in this community development space, specifically as we talk about environmental development, and that's what this work is related to here as it relates to Sidaway Bridge. So I love to talk, and I'm not going to go over my 6 to 8 minutes intentionally, but I have to talk a lot slower than I normally would because I recently had an accident, so I have a slight injury to my mouth. So I'm going to speak slower, so if I go over time, it's not because I'm babbling, it's because I got to finish my sentence. So again, working at Burtonville Park, our work is in community development, and that's really focusing on community transformation and citizen empowerment. That's our vision for community development, transforming communities, empowering citizens. And Sidaway Bridge and Kingsbury Run, because it's not just about Sidaway Bridge. The bridge is a component, but all the space under and around it is just as critical. When we talk about reviving and preserving the bridge, we have to consider the land below it and around it. And those touch points Those spaces, the bridge and the green space of Kingsbury Run, touch on that community transformation and citizen empowerment. I mean, it's about transforming green spaces and preserving the monuments and design and planning with citizens involved in that process. So our role as Burtonville PAR, in terms of how we connected to the bridge and the space around it, we're a convener. As the CDC of the Central Kinsman neighborhood, it's our charge to do community development work. So we have to connect to communities, and that's the people, the place, and the partners. We have to do development work. Most people think of development as real estate, just brick and mortar. We're talking today about environmental development. How are we developing green spaces? How are we preserving the natural elements of the spaces that we occupy? How are we restoring historical monuments like the Sidaway Bridge that are a transportation node? You know, this was a form of connecting to neighborhoods. It's unfortunate that our history reminds us that it was burned to separate neighborhoods, but we live in a time right now where we can be the instruments and the facilitators of reestablishing that connection between these two communities and connecting these two communities to other pathways and connectors that are being developed around both of our communities. And when I think about the partners as it relates to community development, Burtonville PAR is happy to be at this table with Pastor Gibson, with Chris Alvarado at SVD. But it's not just about us. It's not just about the artists who are bringing voice and attention to this work through their creativity. It's about RTA, who owns a lot of plots underneath Sidaway Bridge. It's about Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. It's about the City of Cleveland. It's about the residents that are adjacent to this property that own residential homes. It's about the industrial buildings that are adjacent to this space. There's so many people that we have to partner with to make this type of work happen that, as Polly, our architectural partner, knows, and Drew, I always reference this work as a marathon. We cannot sprint our way to preserving a bridge. We cannot sprint our way to reinvigorating green space. But the reason why we're all here to talk about why Sidaway Bridge is important is because there's so much historical significance in what happened at that bridge and what we can be a part of making happen right now, that the history, just some simple things. There's some architectural engineering that's unique to Sidaway Bridge that has commonalities with the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge, did you know that? I mean, I know there's some architectural people that are geeking out over that little fact, that there is engineering characteristics that are only in Cleveland and connected to the Brooklyn Bridge. That's huge. The burning of the bridge is significant in our history, and I'm glad we're living in a space and time that we're acknowledging things that did not go right so that we can do the work to rectify and ensure that they don't repeat. So that burning is significant. We don't have to ignore that. We have to embrace it and rectify the situation. And then other history of story tells about Kingsbury Run, again, that green space around it. But like as I mentioned, this is about reconnecting communities. And it's also about restoring this structure and doing that by considering how can we preserve it through historical designations with organizations, and how can we restore it, meaning functional connectivity. Is it possible that it can be functional again? And I want to kind of move into wrapping this up. I was doing research because I was geeking out last night and the few days leading up to this, reading journal articles and looking for book references and going over, where's that book, Pastor? Do you hold that book up? Going over the landscape designs that Cornell students made for us around Kingsbury Run and Sidaway Bridge, and just flipping through all this stuff. And I came across this article that was called Garden Valley, circa 1955. And it's talking about how Garden Valley, if you're familiar with Garden Valley, which is in the Central Kinsman area, public housing area, low-income housing development. In 1955, when this was envisioned and designed by the Cleveland Urban Renewal Agency, they intended Garden Valley to be more than just decent housing for low-income residents of Cleveland. It was supposed to be a model neighborhood for Cleveland. And very specifically, they referenced it as a model neighborhood by, I'm going to read a direct quote, by saying, the community of the future is what Garden Valley was intended to be. It was supposed to have wide streets, good lighting, a new school, a playfield, more park areas, room for new churches, new and improved houses, plus greater friendliness and community spirit than already exists. That's what they intended Garden Valley to be in 1955. Some of those things, oh, and the last part of the quote, these developments will make Garden Valley, within a few years, a model neighborhood for all of Cleveland. Imagine that. Garden Valley, a model neighborhood, low-income housing for all of Cleveland. 1955. This was the vision. This was the intention that it was designed around. That did not happen, but a lot of what this vision and intention for this space in 1955 is the same things that we're desiring for communities adjacent to and within Kingsbury Run and attached to Sidaway Bridge. We still want wide streets. We still want good lighting. We still want more play areas. We still want spaces for new churches and improved housing. We still desire all these things, and we're at an opportunity and a point in history where we can make these things happen. And that really excites me. Because after reading this article, the things that I learned is that they didn't succeed or meet their intention because there was not a participatory design process. There was not an opportunity to create spaces like these where we're talking to community about our desires to create or develop environmental spaces. We're not talking at you, talking to you to create, talking with you to create a two-way dialogue so that we as the partners or the institutional stakeholders understand what the residents and the persons who have this lived experience in these spaces, what they desire, so that our execution is not based on our own judgment. It's filtered through the lens and the perspectives of the people who live, work, and play in these communities. Another reason why I failed is the physical design did not encourage responsibility and welcome the public. Didn't create a space for ownership. People preserve what they help to build. If I include you in a new design for a kitchen, you're more likely to make sure that kitchen is functional, you take care of it because you help design it. You're cooking in it every day, but you also built the cabinets and picked out the knobs and painted the colors on the wall. It's now your kitchen. And lastly, you have to be inclusive. The planners and designers have to ensure that the work reflects the people and their desires. That means inclusivity, creating ownership and responsibility, establishing community connection, and creating a sense of place. If we can't create a sense of place around green space and a historic drawbridge, we got some challenges ahead of us. But all of these things are opportunities that we have right now to create. We can create a more participatory design process by doing things like we're doing right now, being intentional, being incremental, and connecting to community along the way, whether that's through talks like these, through social media opportunities, through hike shops where we walk through the space ourselves and envision and reimagine together. But I say all these things to say that the environmental justice work or environmental development work that I'm talking about isn't just about environment. This is also social justice work. Environmental work is social justice work. So we can do all the things to ensure that our design and policy practices are aware of that this is social justice work that impacts our environment, and that in doing that, we can have equity in our environmental investment, remediation, and restoration. These are the things that we can do right now, and this is why Burtonville Carr is happy to be a convener in this process to make that happen.
Hello? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Butts. That was awesome to hear. Another geeky fact about the bridge is it's one of 3 suspension bridges in the country. Hopefully it'll be a historical landmark soon. As we know, people could have been trying to restore Sidaway and Kingsbury Run before you guys, but as we know, it's been about 5 years. So can you talk about the barriers that you faced through those years, to the steps that you have taken into restoring it, and then what barriers did you have to tackle to do that?
So it actually goes back much further than 5 years. I was just talking to Peter and Caroline real recently, who had moved here to the neighborhood a little less than a couple decades ago, around a couple decades ago. And there had been, back then Slavic Village Development had hired, evidently, an engineer to come in and take a look at what it would take to rehab the bridge. And by that point, the bridge would have been uncared for almost 4 years, 35 years. So 35 years of not maintaining it, not checking on the deck, but the cables, etc. Just think about your own house if you didn't care for it for 35 years, what it would look like. So that was the bridge. And this was 20 years ago, and there was a community process to present the findings, and it was going to cost over $1 million to restore the bridge, and there was a big outcry against making that investment back then, 20 years ago. That was around the time that our neighborhood here on this side of Kingsbury Run had already begun changing and becoming more diverse, and there was a lot of fear among folks about what it would mean if we built that bridge again. I don't think we have those issues now. I hope we don't. I think, as Bianca says, a lot of investments need to be ones that are led by the community, and what we hear is that there is desire to restore again. The struggle now, of course, has to do with finding the funds and finding the political will to do so, and making sure that folks are involved in the planning process, like the one that Burton Belcar led.
Check. I also think that, as I tried to allude to, we're even as Chris's remarks just alluded to, we're in a different time, and I feel like a lot of different causes are leaning on the time is now, or the right now, or the fierce urgency of the now. I forgot who coined that. Is that a Barack Obama term? The fierce urgency of the now. Now is important, because it's not just about this bridge or this one environmental project. Our city, our nation is looking at how we're being stewards or not being good stewards of our green spaces, our environmental spaces. Nationally, the city of Cleveland is actually known for a lot of good environmental work. Locally, you wouldn't know that. Our residents, if you had asked our residents, they wouldn't be connected to that viewpoint. They don't know that Cleveland's a national leader in some environmental work as it relates to water equity and circular economies, but some of us in partner organizational roles know that. But because that disconnect exists, there's an opportunity right now to bridge that by, pun intended, building bridges. By building and restoring a bridge, we can establish bridges to making our city a more environmentally focused town. And that's important not just because we want to be greener and we want to do some work to rectify years, decades of mismanagement of our environmental spaces, but it's important because we know research has shown that parks and green space improve quality of life in neighborhoods. And we also know that doing this environmental justice work in our neighborhoods of Slavic Village and Central Kinsman and Buckeye does a lot to rectify harm that's been done through policies and practices of gentrification across our neighborhoods. And focusing on environmental development is one way to rectify that and restore our neighborhoods. So some of the barriers have been investment, funding, dollars always make things happen. And where you don't have a consistent process, again, that involves community, has a clear participation from stakeholders and everybody understands their role and perspective, it's hard to convince somebody to invest if you don't have consistency and a strong cry from community that we want this. We're going to support this. We're going to be responsible for it. Once it's implemented, we're going to help keep it going once somebody decides to pay for it. The funder isn't going to do anything once they cut the check. That's the responsibility of the partners, the residents, and the other institutional organizational stakeholders to maintain the impact once the check is cut. So that's some of the barriers, I would say. Investment and good stewardship once you have financial support and political will.
Okay. Can you talk about Cornell, your partnership with Cornell University in detail? Because I was in one of the meetings and it was so inspiring. I think everyone would want to hear about that.
Absolutely. Professor Mitch Glass out of Cornell University, his wife is from Cleveland, so that was the initial connection. But Mitch also did some work with Midtown Development Corporation on some planning. Again, for one of his classes, had students support Midtown Development, and they did such phenomenal work with Midtown that Mitch was on his own in his research out of Cornell, was curious about Kingsbury Run and Sidaway Bridge. He was geeking out over the architectural design of the bridge all the way in New York. He's looking at this bridge in Cleveland. So he started poking around and met Jeff Sagowski, our former real estate development manager at Burtonville Park, who's now with the county. And Jeff and Mitch connected over Kingsbury Run. And Mitch said, I want my students to help. How can we make this happen? And started a pandemic. And now we've got a bunch of coordinated Zoom sessions with landscape architectural students and planning and design students. So 2 separate courses, 2 different groups of students, 2 different perspectives that met with some of our partners like Slavic Village, like the Sewer District, like RTA, like local art organizations like Journey on Yonder that do grassroots engagement, like Land Studio. They met with a lot of partners who had some information about Kingsbury Run and they asked a lot of questions. BBC was on all of those calls. Our Rose Architectural Fellow, Drew Sargent, was on all of those calls. And through a process of a few months working with the students, they came up with this beautiful book of designs for landscape architectural prompts or proposals that we can use to present to community. So we want to do community engagement, right? I just talked about participatory design. Well, from experience, we know that you get a little bit more participation from people when you don't come to them with a blank slate and say, hey, we got 89 acres of green space, what do you want to do? As opposed to saying, we've got 89 acres of green space, and we talked to some students who came up with 5 designs. Of these 5, which one do you like? And what would you want to tweak about the one that you do like to make it more personal to what you really want to see here? You get a little bit more participation when you give people some options to say, oh, well, you know, I don't like the blue one, but I like the green one if you add some more pink to it. You know what I'm trying to say? So that's what the work with the Cornell students did. It gave us a foundation and an opportunity to engage partners to support their creativity and inquisitiveness. And it gave us, the end product gave us something that we can then present to community to do deeper engagement to establish that participatory design process. Invaluable stuff. And by working with university students, we were talking about investment and cost. That was free. We like free things, especially free things that create great impact. As I said, this is a basis for what we're going to move forward to incrementally to keep doing this work around the bridge and around the surrounding green space. Hello?
Can you give advice, or what advice would you give to the community to be involved, or can you let us know how we can be involved and help with this initiative?
I don't want to monopolize. You go ahead, I'll go after you.
Okay. Be persistent. Be persistent. Know that your voice matters even when doors get shut. And find allies like Bianca, like Pastor Gibson, like Lynn and Joe and our staff who can elevate that voice, who can make it louder.
I'd say a tangible way that for those here and even for those watching in other spaces, there's a half sheet at the registration table has a QR code on it, and it's just, you scan that, you can tell me how you want to be followed up. I want to know how I can get involved and make a donation. I want to know how can I go on one of your hiking workshops to walk through the space and help contribute thoughts and ideas. I just want you to email me if you're going to do another talk or if there are major project updates. Let us know how you want to be engaged. If you don't want to know about every single thing, but you want to know when the bridge is going to be getting recommended for historical monument designation, let us know that. As Chris said, be persistent. I want you to be, one of the things that I learned in community and neighborhood work is I want to be an advocate for residents in the spaces that I occupy, but I hope and my goal is to establish enough rapport with you that you become an advocate for me and my organization in the spaces that you occupy. So that when I'm sitting at the table with funders and other institutional partners, I'm able to speak on the perspective of residents. But I want you to be able to speak on the perspective of myself and my organization as a partner, because now we have a rapport. So when you're in resident spaces or in neighbor spaces, you can say, hey, I know you're interested in parks and green space. Do you know what Burtonville, Carl, and Slavic Village are doing around Sidaway Bridge? That might be something you want to tap into. Or you've been saying you want to hike more. There's a workshop that talks about how we can establish more hiking trails in our neighborhood. Would you want to come? I want to establish relationships so that you can be an advocate for us and we can advocate for you. Two-way advocacy is really important to do good old-fashioned word-of-mouth spreading of the message about this work. So those are tangible ways that I feel like community can be involved.
I so appreciate those comments. I would start by saying, stay on the path that you're on, because you've been consistent along the way in working, and you have to invite others, as you have been, to be on the path with you. So if we were having a conversation with the community residents right now, one of the primary issues that they would raise is safety. So they would say, safety is more important to me, Pastor, than the bridges right now. And so there has to be this linear path. So stay on the path to safety. The other thing that has been pressed hard is the importance of new housing, investment in this community. And so again, if some of the residents were speaking today, they would say, safety is a huge priority and investment. And so here's how I process that in my mind. And so when I come to work and I spend a lot of time on this. So if you were to look at my schedule over the last 4 months, and the congregation doesn't really know this, probably at least 40% of my time is not on traditional congregation stuff. It's on actually this neighborhood and this community. Today, all of my morning was spent on the Hyacinth community. And that's the way it is. And so I'm going to give you this acronym. And so, pastors have this thing about acronyms. And so I'm going to give you this acronym of RING, because here's how I kind of think about it. So the R stands for relationship. I think in terms of moving forward together, it is building those strong relationships, as has happened, but continuing to build those relationships, because we can't really move forward if there's not relational trust. So R in the ring is relationship. The I in ring is investment, because there's been so much disinvestment. And unless there is strong investment, and let me be more specific, so unless there are new homes that are developed here, unless that investment takes place, then we won't move forward. The Sidaway Bridge doesn't become that important unless there's investment in housing and safety. So, relationships, investment. The other one really hits me is in the pandemic. The other one is simple, it's new. So when you invest in something, if you do the same old thing, especially after the pandemic, if we go back to building homes as we did in the pandemic without having plugs where they have the traditional plugs where you can plug in your phone and it's a direct outlet. But if we aren't doing things with solar panels, and if we aren't innovative, if it's not new, then it's not valued in the same way. Because if we go back to 1955, and you just read it, Bianca, thank you. There were wonderful aspirational dreams there, but there wasn't the execution that was desired. And so unless we look at it new, unless we look at things like equity. And then the last part of the acronym for me is growth. If something is alive, then it grows. And so I'm not just talking about numbers. I'm not just talking about numbers, but I'm also talking about how we think about our assets. So if I have a new house, I got to take care of my house. So I can't throw trash on the street. I have to be invested in safety as well. So for me, when I come here on a daily basis, so I'm not asking you to think about it this way, but what drives to my thinking is relationship investment, doing something new, and growth.
Pastor Gibson's also a lawyer. I don't know if you guys know that. He's a busy man. Pastor Gibson, can you give us a short run through of all your community partners in the area or that you work with?
Well, I couldn't list them all, so certainly these two are important. And so for our congregation, we came here 10 years ago. We were on the other side of the bridge on Holton, and now we're on this side of the bridge. And so we get the importance of the bridge. But so behind you is the Haven Home. It's a place for people who were formerly homeless. This should become a daycare soon with 65 new daycare seats. We gave away clothes today, so we give away clothes to thousands of people. We give away, and so that's a number of people donating clothes and then distributing the clothes. We give away food to 12 to 15,000 people a year. Fresh produce every second and fourth Saturday. This coming Saturday, if somebody wants fresh produce, they can come to the lot. Community garden, the block clubs are incredible, and the way in which there's a connection. We actually we employ people who live in this neighborhood who are also members of the congregation. So the partnerships are too numerous to mention. What I would say is that we understand as a congregation that we can't do what we need to do without partnerships. We're really clear on that we can't do it alone.
That's one of the reasons why I picked Elizabeth Baptist Church as my site. I have two sites. The Sidaway Bridge is a site, and it is a subject of my sculpture, but I picked Elizabeth Baptist Church because I feel very peaceful here. I just feel like an energy of community, thriving. So I just wanted to say that. And do any of you guys have a personal story to share about Sidaway Bridge, Kingsway Run? Somebody said that you do, Pastor Gibson, but I don't want to put you on the spot, but okay, I'm putting you on the spot. I heard you have a story to share, and I want to hear it.
Three parts of a quick story. So probably my second year being the pastor, and we were on Holton. There's a dad who comes and they become a member of the congregation. And he tells me about the need. And so they lived in Garden Valley at that point. And he woke up one morning and there was a dead body in his backyard. They were close to the bridge. And so, so ministry in the city is real, right? It's that close. And so we were still in relationship with that family. But there was a reality of life and death on both sides of the bridge. And then coming here, when I got here and was exposed to it, sort of walking the bridge and getting the history, and knowing the people on both sides, and knowing that there was no real reason for the disconnect today. Let me say that again. There is no real legitimate reason for a disconnect today. So then I became just charged with making sure that we can build that bridge. We have to take the steps before, so safety and housing and the investment. And then Jackie Gillen
Jackie was really her Birdwell Park, and she talked about, she said, hey Pastor, she said, I know you love the bridge, and I got a chance to walk with some people from Birdwell Park, and she said, I'm just excited about where we're going. I can transition.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up Jackie. She was going to be mentioned at some point before we departed, and she was and is instrumental in establishing the Black Environmental Leaders Organization or Association in the city of Cleveland. And in addition to all the other work that she's done across our neighborhoods, our communities, our green spaces, to bring voice to what some may consider the voiceless in our communities as it relates to environmental work. And one quick story that I have around the Sidaway Bridge, I just had to take a moment to just say Jackie's name over and over and over again, just because of how significant she is. But it has nothing to do with my story. But this July 4th weekend, our family reunion. We haven't been together in almost 2 years because of, present circumstances. So people came in from out of town. Everybody was safe and tested and able to convene. And you're shooting the stuff with the people you haven't seen in a while. And I'm talking to my uncle, who's like a father to me. He's like, what are you doing? Who are you working for now? What are you up to? Tell him I'm working for EBC. And I said, yeah, I'm really excited about this project. It's around Sidaway Bridge and Kingsbury Run. I'm describing what all these things are. He said, Sidaway Bridge? I know Sidaway Bridge. When I was a kid, your granddad's best friend lived in a house, and right from his backyard where we used to play, we used to always look at that bridge. And it was so close, we always thought we could touch it, but we never got to go across the bridge. We were told never to go across that bridge. But I always remembered wanting to go across that bridge. So it's just so interesting that now my niece is doing something to try to figure out how can somebody else go across that bridge since I wasn't able to. He's like, that's really exciting. He's like, I'm glad you're doing that work. So I walked away from that conversation fired up and ready to go. Fired up and ready to go, because now I not only have my own reasons for wanting to work on Sidaway Bridge, because I'm passionate about environmental justice for Black and brown neighborhoods in Cleveland and our country, but now I know that in doing my work, my uncle Nick, is proud that I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So I was already proud about making an impact for our neighborhoods. Now that I know in doing the work to make an impact for our neighborhoods, I'm doing something that's making my family proud and rectifying or creating an opportunity or a pathway to do something he was never able to do, which is go across that bridge. So that's my Sidaway story.
No, I can't top that. I'm not even gonna try.
Okay, so maybe we should go to questions unless you guys have anything else to say. I'm gonna say real quick that I'm trying to be a partner with you all, and as a partner, I made these pendants, Sidaway Bridge pendants, that I'm raising money to support this cause. Sidaway Bridge, Kingsbury Run, Slavic Village, Cleveland. I just, the community, I want to try, as an artist, try to find a way that I can support things that mean something to me and my community and everyone. So, I have these pendants, and if you need any more information about it, you can go to my website. Also, I'd like to collect stories from people about Sidaway Bridge for my partners. So if anyone's interested, please let me know. And let's go to questions. Anybody have a question out there?
Can you speak to, you didn't mention as partners the political leadership in your community. Are they receptive to what you're trying to do? And as an election year approaches,
Is there anybody whose platform is suggesting that they will help in what you're trying to do as well?
I wouldn't speak to what anybody's, any new candidate's platform is suggesting. I don't think that there's been no concrete information for me to make a comment on that. But current leadership, we have the full support of Councilwoman Griffin, which is a part of our Buckeye neighborhood. We have the full support of Councilwoman Dolores Gray and her predecessor, Phyllis Cleveland, around this effort. Again, this is a marathon effort, so there is no telling who could be in these leadership positions by the time this project reaches different incremental phases of fruition. So it's not important about who's in that space, it's important about the consistency and the advocacy of the residents, because interchange out the leader, they still have to serve the same people. So if we've built consistency in our messaging and our advocacy and our residents continue to say, whoever's in this council seat, whoever's in this mayor seat, whoever's running city planning, the people of these neighborhoods still want the same thing. We want this green space redeveloped. We know it's going to take some time. We know it's going to take incremental investment. We just want to keep plugging and chugging at it. So any candidate who's coming into office, they need to know that that's the will of the people. If we continue to foster enough relationships for it to be the will of the people, that's our role, is to continue to maintain connectivity with residents so that we understand that that is still the will of the people, that they still want that. If we're trying to just do something that community doesn't want, it's for naught. It's a waste of our energy if we're not working for the will of the people. So again, we have the support of those current political leaders, and that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, and I think honestly, it may not necessarily be a function, say, of City of Cleveland or Cuyahoga County to make the investment in that. You know, back in 1966, that would have been the time, right, for the city to come in and make the repairs and open the bridge back up again. Now it's a bit far gone. The $1 million that I quoted, which was 20 years ago, you can at least double that now, if not triple that, or not go further than that. So a lot of it is going to have to be through those partnerships, through us working together, working with the city and the political leadership. They're working with Cuyahoga County, working with folks like ODOT that is finishing up the Opportunity Corridor. However you feel about that, it will include a trail and a bridge that you can walk and bike across to get from Hyacinth here in Slavic Village to Garden Valley and Kinsman over there. So that's going to be opened up in November, but it's not the Sidaway Bridge. I think what's also very positive is that for the first time, really ever, Cleveland Metro Parks got the word Cleveland in it, but until recently it didn't do a whole lot in the city, is making investments in the city and making those connections. So anybody who's been to the completion of Towpath Trail or the Red Line Greenway, you can see examples of that Metro Parks investment that includes federal dollars, state dollars that were put in for there. So Metro Parks just this year, just in May, put in a grant request to the federal government. It's called the RAISE grant, that would fund 4 projects. One over in Euclid. These are all trail projects. They're connector projects. There's gaps in our trail network. It'd be like if you were driving along 77 and all of a sudden just stopped existing between Grant Avenue and I-480. So that's kind of what our biking and pedestrian trail network is like right now. So there's these gaps. One of them's over in Euclid. Another gap is the downtown connector trail that would be going along I-77. That would basically connect up with Morgana Run Trail. So if you go down 77, you see something that looks like a big dandelion sculpture. That's where the trail ends now. And so that would include funding for the planning and engineering for that to connect you up all the way into downtown where Progressive Field is now. It also includes funding for the bottom end, the southern end of the Morgana Run Trail that'll connect through Union Miles, through Miles Park, into the falls, Mill Creek Falls. And that'll open up the southeast side. And it includes a connection between East 55th Street, right here, the rapid station, along the tracks to East 37th Street rapid station, which is where downtown connector trail will be going. And so every time Metro Parks puts in that kind of investment and expands the network, it gives us the opportunity to say, hey, why don't you go a step further? Because they have to, in order to make investments, they go one step at a time. That could include the Sidaway Bridge because it'll be connected to their system, and we have that opportunity to get that kind of support that we need. So it's not just political; it's all of us working together.
So my experience has been that the elected officials have been supportive. So those who are in office now have been supportive of some of the activities here. Again, I'll go back to, those two items of safety and housing. So there's support there. I believe that the new elected officials that would come in both on the ward level or on the city level, I'm encouraged by where we're going. And so I think we're going to be able to build upon work and successes of the past. So I'm optimistic. I also think that we're going to get new vision, new perspective. So I don't see the political dynamic as an impediment. We all have to continue to be focused. We have to, and thank you, Bianca, for saying it. She said, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So, again, I like things to work quickly, and it's always too slow for me. That's my issue, not anybody else's issue. God is always working my patience. So, I want new housing to be here tomorrow. I want safety to have been here yesterday in a different way. And so, we do have to remain committed.
I can reiterate with Chris, okay? I started the block clubs back here in 1999. I was the original. I'm the only block club in the whole Ward 5. I started it in my house with 3 people. The first thing that came up was that Sidaway Bridge. So then, maybe fast forward to what Pete was saying, probably 10, 15 years later, it came up again when I was Lost Nation Block Club. The reason why we're Lost Nation over here, because we're always the lost part of the city of Cleveland and Slavic Village. So that's how we got it. Now, they were talking about connecting that bridge. There was a safety issue then. Okay? Always has been a safety. They come through, Garden Valley will come through from over there through East 66th Street on the back side. They come over, they steal bikes, they rob people. There's always been that issue. If it's turned into a park area and not, maybe connected, but have it so that it's not walkable, I can see that. But to make it more convenient for people to come over here into our neighborhood when we already have problems with safety is not going to be the correct thing to do.
So, and I hear you. The way, the safest parts. Let me put it kind of in a question, but not really, because I'm going to give you the answer. When you think about when you feel safest in a city, it's when you're around. It's oftentimes when you're around other folks, right? Other folks who, you're going to a ball game, you're walking downtown, you're at the grocery store, you're around other folks. And when is it that you feel least safe in a city? It's when you're by yourself. It's dark. Maybe there's a lot of overgrowth. You hear a funny, you hear a sound. You don't feel safe. And I think one of the reasons why, you talk about Lost Nation Block Club, that this neighborhood, this part of the neighborhood, can oftentimes feel lost and forgotten is because it's not well connected, right? There's not, folks, unless you live here, maybe there's not a reason to come here unless you're going to church. It's not kind of big enough to have its own stores and such, although we want to put more housing in here and more folks here. But that's the whole thing, is that we're safer not when we exclude what we think are going to be folks that might do harm, and it could be folks right here in the neighborhood just across the street. It's when we bring in more good folks and connect them with each other and make those and make those relationships and build those friendships. And that's the example of the bridge, right? That's the idea of building connections again, building relationships that we didn't know that we could have, building friendships that we couldn't think of a year ago, being able to walk across the bridge and go to the library, go to Cornucopia Place, have a cup of coffee with a friend, whether it's a friend from here or a friend across the bridge. That, we get that open. It's a 5-minute walk to have a really good sandwich and a cup of soup. Not even that much, right? So those are things that we can enjoy if we make those connections, and safety is absolutely important for all of us. There's not a person that you're going to talk to who says, I'd rather be unsafe, right? But we do it by making this, all of our neighborhoods more attractive, more appealing for more folks to come in, and this is a part of it.
I think I just want to add about establishing those connections. And we talked about the trail work, and Chris talked about filling in the gaps between our trails. And I just would love to live in a space and time where I could be 15 to 20 minute bike ride away from a waterfall, even though I live in Larchmere. That I could ride through Kingsbury Run, connect through Morgana Run Trail, hop off, have a moment of peace and solidarity at the waterfall, and keep riding downtown to get to the lake. Because now we don't only have a green space that's developed and a bridge that's restored, that space is now becoming a node of connectivity to other established work around transportation-oriented design. And that transportation-oriented design isn't prioritizing cars and vehicles, it's thinking multimodal. So it's thinking about the walker, the roller, our differently abled individuals, the bicyclist, is prioritizing the pedestrian over the vehicle. And that's what Kingsbury Run and Sidaway Bridge represent, not just reestablishing access to our respective neighborhoods, but reestablishing connectivity, not just proximity, but connectivity not just to our two neighborhoods, but to adjacent neighborhoods and pathways and nodes of connection to the entire city, and not just by vehicle. That not only opens the opportunity for different ways to access our communities, but it opens the door to opportunities for jobs. Now I live in Slavic Village and I can work downtown and not have to worry about driving there, which could have been a barrier to me getting a job. But I could potentially walk if I have the time, or bike, or scoot. What are these little bird scooters and all these different things that are popping up all around the city? So it's not just about providing two-way access to Slavic Village and Kinsman and thinking about what other unsavory element can now come across the bridge. It's thinking about what other opportunities are we introducing to be able to come across that bridge. What other doors are we opening to different forms of transportation by erecting this bridge or reestablishing this bridge? And how are we creating space for new relationship and new leveraging of assets across our communities, and not just our two communities, but adjacent neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland? It's really important work.
So I appreciate the comment, because I think it's important to be candid. And if you have a perspective, and it might be a different perspective, I think it's important to express all those perspectives. And so I'm going to frame it a little bit. In terms of history. So when we got here, we've been here for 10 years. The second year we were here, we had a person who worked for us who was cutting the grass. It was almost about where that black car is. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, somebody came and put a gun to his head the second year we were here. Now, we could make a conclusion, because I don't want to suggest that it's one side of the bridge or the other, because both sides, east and west side, have challenges. And so we could have packed up then and we could have said, we're out. Or the other thing that we could have did is, other things we could have done is we could have put fencing up. We could have been fencing up, and we could have established the moat to say that here's how we're going to operate. So we didn't do any of that because, and so some of this is, so my faith, we come into a place so that a place can be transformed, and we don't have any preconceptions about where someone has come from, but more importantly, where they can go. Because we believe that if somebody may not be at best practices mode, because I'm certainly not at best practices mode, I can get better. And so there's a belief that on both sides we can get better. And this is a symbol right here. The fact that the two of them are here and they represent both sides of the bridge, they're here, and they're saying, okay, let's collaborate. And let me highlight some of the things that is happening on both sides. So on Sunday, when I was leaving, because I was actually going to visit Jackie. I was leaving here, I went to visit Jackie. I drove down Colfax. And on Colfax, if you haven't driven down Colfax, there are a dozen new homes there. That's just on the other side of the bridge. I mean, it's literally like it's 150 yards from the other side of the bridge. On this side of the bridge, Slavic Village Development has been doing housing as well, transformative housing, looking to do more. So on both sides of the bridge are changing positively. There is investment that is taking place. And you also have to change mind and cultures and thoughts and beliefs as well. And that's where we are in this season. So the opening of the bridge ultimately is critical, not just for our neighborhoods, but I would say for our humanity.
Yes, Pastor.
I would just like to say that the Sidaway Bridge, Kingsbury Run, it's been decades of, I just mean, the bridge, right as it is now, with nobody doing anything with it, it invites crime, because it says that this place doesn't matter. So once, I encourage you to come see, or I'll bring it to you, the book that Burton Bell Carr did with the Cornell State University students. They're talking about a community working together with the history of the space and building gardens, and the Sidaway isn't anything without Kingsbury Run, So I think the attention and the time that the community brings to the space will, crime's not going to stop, but it will help, because people will know that this place matters. We matter. The people, the community matters. We're putting a lot of love and time and money into the space. That's just
one thing. So just one more thing. We want to get this other question. So before we purchased this place, we looked at this place, and I came here at night, because if you're going to purchase a place, you should come at night and see what's going on.
Yeah.
And when I came here, in the parking lot, there was some stuff going on. There were people in cars. They were dealing drugs. There was some stuff going on in this parking lot. That's not going on now. Now, it's a small piece of it. And we're all working together to get those other pieces there, and the safety is critical. But our presence here and our focus on it changes. It's always slower than I would like. You're bringing the mic to you.
This is adding on to this piece. I have to tell you, in the research that I've done getting where I am, I had to read a lot of stuff about in-group and out-group. And the plain fact is that we create our own boundaries, we create our own perceptions. And the only way we get a different perception is when we mingle. That is proven over and over again. You get to know your neighbor by being with your neighbor. Otherwise, you have misperceptions. Misperceptions keep promoting the same fallacies. So I do believe, if I was listening to your talk about the bridge and I'm picturing in my head on either end of the bridge, no matter which way the sign is pointing, it says, entering Cleveland. So whichever way you go on that bridge, you're entering Cleveland. So if you live in Cleveland, we're Clevelanders. We should think of ourselves that way. And I think crime is a thing unto itself. We all have to work on that issue. But separation isn't going to improve that either. And that's just my opinion.
This might be their question, but they'd like to know, where is the development going on in Slavic Village?
I think that's my.
That's all you, Chris.
That's all me. Yeah. All right. So it's been a while since we've been able to get things up and going up in Hyacinth and North Broadway. Several years ago, we were able to bring in some folks with Rebuilding Together to help fix up houses up here in Hyacinth. We've been able to partner with University Settlement over on Broadway, over the old St. Alexis Hospital. There's going to be 87 new units of housing there, both apartments and attached condominiums, along with the new headquarters for University Settlement. It's the biggest investment that we've had up in the Ward 5 part of the neighborhood for, goodness, over 20 years now. We are working with Elizabeth Baptist Church on doing tax credit projects up here in the Hyacinth neighborhood of Slavic Village. So that would be new housing. Pastor Gibson, I think you can talk a little bit about the one project that you've got going on, and then the second project will be around a transit-oriented development, just basically meaning housing that's near the rapid station over here near the East 55th Street rapid station. So we're beginning to put together an application for that, because you want to get in as much equity investment as possible to make the development take place, because quite frankly, we're still struggling throughout the eastern part of Cleveland to build new housing. Because when you build a new house, you need to be able to sell it to somebody who can get a mortgage to cover the cost of the house. And in order to get the mortgage to cover the cost of the house, the appraisal has to come in to cover the cost of the house. And the appraisals right now in east of the Cuyahoga, for the most part, do not cover the cost of building a new house. So in order to get there, you have to get equity investments and tax credit projects to help cover that gap between what it costs to build a house and what you can actually appraise, what you can actually get in a mortgage. So that's going to be coming up pretty darn soon. I know Burton Belcar has been really good at this as well. Pastor Gibson can talk about the project here in the neighborhood.
Yes, so, this morning, I was actually in a meeting to raise money, sort of large amounts of money to build housing in this neighborhood. And so we're pretty far down, at least part of the trail of visioning it, so that some of the lots that we see here would have new housing. And so we're spending the time trying to get that done, because we know that it's needed once that investment takes place. And so, Ed, you've said in meetings, and you said it well, you said, where is the housing? Where's the new housing? And so one of the things I would go back to, so the last time we had a panel in this neighborhood, it was actually in the sanctuary. And Chris said, and he said, listen, there's a focus on North Broadway. North Broadway is first. And he said, next is going to be Hyacinth. Now, so when I may be in meetings that you're not in, so I will always in those meetings say, we're next. Or if I'm on a basketball court after the game is over, I got now. Not next. I got now. And so now that university settlement is up, we're on the court now. It's our time. So that's how I look at it. That's how I, like. And so Chris will know. Chris knows that, you know, that we push hard, we work hard together, and Chris has been great. It's our time.
And I do have to emphasize, it's not because I'm pig-headed. That we'll grant that. But to be able to get that equity investment, you need to show other investment around. And so that's, remember when I was talking about Metro Parks, they go one step at a time. That's the same thing when it comes to getting those kinds of tax credits. In order to get it, and it feels contradictory, you have to show that there was investment nearby. Well, all right, so we've got Opportunity Corridor finishing up, so that adds points to an application for equity investment. We got the Rising, where University Settlement is coming in, that adds points. We have investment that's going to be taking place over on 55th and Broadway, that's adding points. So there's a strategy behind it, and it's based on being able to show we've got all this investment taking place all around, and now's the time. And this is when it's going to be successful.
Can I say one more thing? So, as you guys thought about either side of the bridge community event that each community hosts to kind of bring folks together so they'll have to kind of do away with the suspicions of each other, and just each side of the bridge host it. As well as there's a host of universities in our community. Have you guys reached out to them to see if they could be part of the restoration of your bridge? I know that there's a university in St. Clairsville, Ohio, Beaumont Technical College, premier two-year college. They're like world-renowned. I think they sent people to Notre Dame Cathedral to help them do that restoration. But they actually have a host of young people graduating from their two-year program that are some of the, say, Cracker Jacks. So you might want to kind of reach out to them as well.
So your initial question was, are we planning any events on either side of the neighborhoods?
I guess alternating events where, you got folks going on Birdville, Park side, and Slavic Village, folks going on the other side. Kind of just alternate that throughout the year and kind of build some relationships so that communities will see each other. And, if you're concerned about someone stealing, be less concerned for someone.
So I'm not even thinking that fragmented. What we are thinking is hosting events. First and foremost, are hike shops or happy hour hike shops. So September 10th will be the first happy hour hike shop, which is just us taking a hike through Kingsbury Run, experiencing Sidaway Bridge, and having some conversations as we walk about how we want to reimagine the space. Leveraging some of the designs. Happy hour, so 5 to 6 p.m. on Friday, September 10th. There will be no cocktails, but you can bring your own spirit.
Singular spirit.
You get that? Yes, spirit, not spirits. Do what you will when you leave us. You're an adult and of sound mind. But the happy hour hike shop is the first opportunity for us to walk through the space together, leverage some of the design work that we did with the Cornell students, and have a conversation. That's not restricted to Burton Bell Carr or Central Kinsman residents. That's not restricted to Slavic Village residents. That's restricted to somebody who might be sitting in the back and lives in Detroit Shoreway, but they are interested in the architectural design and engineering of this bridge, and they want to come. I know several Shaker Heights residents that are obsessed with Kingsbury Run, and they are chomping at the bit to be involved in anything. So we're thinking of events that bring together people who live on either side of the bridge, work on businesses on either side of the bridge, but any Clevelander or adjacent Cleveland community that wants to engage with us around this bridge, we're not going to turn them away. So that's the event that we're starting with, that hike shop, September 10th, Friday, happy hour, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. I'm sorry? Well, I won't say that, because if it rains, on our test walk, I ruined a pair of very nice hiking boots because I was walking in some mud and I just sunk right down in there. So if it's too wet, we won't compromise any other people's shoes. Yeah, but we will, play it by ear and get proper communication out. But that's the first event. Other events that I hope come to fruition based on Shani's declaration and my own personal affinity to capturing the narratives and capturing stories is we want to find opportunities to do that, whether that's through podcasting or radio. We have a radio station, community radio station at Burtonville Car, WOVU. Is it leveraging that space? Is it leveraging relationships with Idea Stream, as we have had conversations on their Inside the Bricks, Behind the Bricks? I forgot the name of the series, but Woodhill Community Homes was featured on there on Conversations. So there are ways that we can capture this narrative. There are so many people who are talented and just remarkable storytellers that Burtonville Car, again, we can leverage partnerships. We don't have to do everything on our own. We know that we want the stories to help inform the design. We don't have to be the story catchers. We need to work with the people who are proficient at storytelling and capturing the narratives and being a trusted advisor and partner to residents to get that information so that we can leverage it to make informed decisions on behalf of and with community. So events that allow us to capture stories and narratives is something we want to do, and we're starting with that hike shop that is not restricted to where you call home, but is restricted to how you want to see this space and this bridge developed incrementally for the betterment of our respective communities and our city overall.
Hello. So first off, it's a comment, and then I'll go with a couple questions. Okay. Comment is, looking up the life expectancy of a suspension bridge, about 100 years, and that's a well-maintained suspension bridge. And that bridge was built in 1930. Doing my math, it's 91 years old. So just throwing that out there. So the other thing is, you mentioned probably as much as, $3 million to renovate the bridge, potentially. How do we validate that cost when we actually have part of the opportunity corridor that actually is going to act as a conduit between Kinsman and this neighborhood, where you can actually ride your bike, your car, whatever you mentioned, across to 55th, when there's no reason for you to come over here? Like, it doesn't make sense. If you already have a bridge that we spent millions of dollars on tax dollars, so you can come across and travel that bridge as a pedestrian, why do we need a pedestrian bridge here that's going to cost us $3 million when that money could be better spent in this neighborhood? Thank you.
You bet. So that's a good question. And it's one I struggle with, because all of us pushed hard to have a dedicated bike and pedestrian, not just the bridge as a part of the opportunity corridor, but going all the way down, all the way toward University Circle. I'll give the snarky answer, not snarky to you, but maybe a little bit to the city of Cleveland when it comes to the that lift bridge over in North Coast Harbor, right? That maybe cuts 30 seconds out of crossing from Warnovich Park over to the Science Center, but I'm not a snarky person. I think we have to be able to put it in context. I mean, I think the only way that we can justify this, and it can't be all local dollars that go into this, because you're right. I mean, there's a lot of other things that we need to be doing with our local dollars to build up our communities. This is a part of it, but there's many other things that need to be taking place. I think it's looking at what's available and what we can compete for in terms of grant dollars from the state and the federal level, because it's going to get spent somewhere in Ohio, somewhere in the United States. If we can show the context from a historical perspective, from a natural history perspective, and make it so that's not just about that bridge, but it's about bigger connections, then we have an argument to make. And if we can't make that argument, we don't get the money.
I also want to thank you for your comments and your question. I just want to clarify that $3 million was like a loose figure. Like, we don't know how much it will cost to restore the bridge because we're literally waiting on that information. Those calculations are happening like right now. There are Keebler elves crunching numbers to let us know in phases what would it cost to restore this bridge. So I can't even speak with the clear conscience and say that it's $3 million. What I will allude to is just because there is money that gets allocated potentially to investing in this work, that doesn't mean that that same money could have been utilized to invest in certain neighborhood projects. There are opportunities where money is designated for certain things. So we could go to a philanthropic funder out of San Francisco who's only paying for green space development or historical preservation projects. If we get that money hypothetically and it comes in and it's like, oh, well, that $1.2 million could have been spent on building houses. Actually, it could not have, because we couldn't have gotten that $1.2 million if we were talking about building housing. So I don't want us to get caught up in making the assumption that if a project gets funding, that's funding received is taking away from funding being allocated to other things relevant to developing a neighborhood and its priorities, because it's not necessarily always the case, but I understand that concern. Meaning, like as the pastor alluded to, we're concerned about
put in the eye and say you're spending that much money on that bridge.
You gotta give me space.
No, I'm not.
You have to give me space to respond. I respected your voice.
That we have in this neighborhood.
I'm not disputing your problem, sir. I'm just trying to state my point in response to your perspective. And your perspective is absolutely valid. And I'm not disputing your problems, because I can talk about the problems in my neighborhood. I could talk about the problems of Citrus and Buckeye, but I'd rather illuminate solutions and opportunities for us without dismissing anybody's problems. All I'm trying to say is that when there is investment, that doesn't mean that that takes away from money going towards existing neighborhood priorities. They may not be the same buckets of money that can fund the same things. So I don't want us to get caught in viewing investment as taking away from something else when they could not have been the same thing in the initial seeking of funding. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can I just
Yeah. 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 Yes, and also in that same vein, when you apply for historical designation for monuments, that opens up the gates to certain funding for just historical designations. So that can introduce specific investment or specific ways to preserve the asset that have nothing to do with other investments or priorities. So absolutely, to your point, we're exploring that feasibility is a process that takes time to explore with the state designating agencies, and we started that process. The first step was a questionnaire, and we did that. And the questionnaire is simply an opportunity to say, hey, is this project even remotely possible to be considered a historical monument? Should you even waste your time applying and going through the rigorous steps it takes to even go down the path of historical designation? Let's just do a tester. Let's dip our toe in the water and see, can Sidaway Bridge even be considered a historical monument? We did that initial questionnaire, and the findings on that initial questionnaire is it's a good candidate. You should keep going. Go to the next step. So we're going to take the next step, and we're going to do this step by step, keep informing people, and keep ensuring that by investing in this project, we're not depleting or taking away from other assets and investment and other things. As the pastor alluded to, as we're working on Sidaway Bridge, we just had a ribbon cutting for all these homes on Colfax. So we're not despising our small beginnings or huge impact in residential home development while working on environmental efforts. We don't have to do one or the other. We can do both, and we can pursue multiple priorities and do them at different timing and phasings to make impact for our greater communities.
Yes, so I appreciate both questions. And so my approach to this is somewhat linear. And so I think it's an absolutely valid question to talk about the allocation of assets and resources, and to talk about how some resources can be dedicated in certain areas. I think I like the question and the response. And so if you were asked me if we were prioritizing, should we restore Sidaway Bridge before we have housing? So in my mind, we should have housing first. In my mind, and there's this linear step, and so let's go down that path. And that's the way I think about it, that we should have the housing first. And then at the same time, when there are assets, so part of what attracted me, and again, I was the only one here. When I came here, I was between those trees and this building. These trees did it for me, because I didn't get a chance to go in the building. These trees did it for me. And thinking about this space in the middle of the city of Cleveland with trees like this was unusual. I was like, man, I'm in the cut, but it sure is beautiful here. And so I want to have, so for me, it's, and members of our congregation know this about me, so it's usually not either or. For me, it's both and. And so I want to have housing and an incredible asset that's green, that's walkable in this neighborhood, because if we can have it in Lakewood, if we can have it in Tremont, if we can have it on the Gold Coast, I want it here too. So that's my bias. So my bias is both and.
Just like Ed does. Even though it's a backwards way of thinking, when we have these anchor projects, like say the Sidaway Bridge project in Kingsbury Run gets funded, what opportunities then do we have to tap into, aside from tax credits, do you think that are out there for investment in this neighborhood?
It makes it more attractive. I mean, when you have something that's kind of amazing, other folks want to invest. Other folks want to move in. It can be hard to quantify in dollars what that means in terms of building up that sense of pride. I mean, this is why we have different folks who are capable of doing different things. And how is it that we work with the partners who are good at figuring out how to get investment or engineering or planning for these things, but to do their work, give them the space to do that, while other folks are focusing on housing, other folks are focusing on safety. I think we can walk and chew bubble gum and juggle and sing a song all at the same time. We just have to be just kind of vigilant about it.
Let me go next, and so I'm actually going to be very, very specific, and it's a today thing. So I mentioned that this morning, and our congregation is probably going to vote me out after this, because what are you spending all your time doing? And so this morning I had a conversation with a non-traditional funder and it had nothing to do with Elizabeth Baptist Church. It was actually just to get funding for housing in this neighborhood. And so it was possibly, we could possibly get $250,000 from this source. And so it was important for me to spend that time this morning, because that needs to happen. And thank you for prompting us. So the discussions that, that Bianca and Chris would have, there are discussions that I might have if we're all working on that. And so part of, so sitting in this seat, that's part of my responsibility, but it's a part of our responsibility as well. And so because we have that focus, because housing and safety is important to me, that's why I spent that time. And I think I got a loose commitment, and this was part of the discussion. Because I was talking about, types of housing that we might do, and one type of housing was single story, Like there'd be some two-story homes, there'd be some two-story homes as well, but there'd be a single-story home that would be accessible. And so just in mentioning that, the person who's across the table says, Pastor Gibson, it is your lucky day. He says, you know, I think there might be some funding just for accessible housing because we've been trying to do it, dedicated funding. Yep. Dedicated funding. And so if you kind of look at that, we might, you know, there might be some money. Now, there are 100 steps to take to get there, but we've begun the process. And so I mentioned that's a today example. That's a today example. And we'll keep going down the path to get to completion, fruition, exhaustion, however we get there, but we're going to get there. It's not about if, it's about when.
And the last thing I'll say on this question is other opportunities outside of the brick and mortar development. We talk a lot about housing because it's an important priority across many of our Cleveland neighborhoods when we talk about transforming communities. I also want to just think about transforming communities outside of just the buildings we erect, but the people that we impact. And this type of work, this type of project, Kingsbury Run and Sidaway Bridge, is about investing in spaces that can transform the quality of life for residents who are living in this new housing or living in existing housing. If we only focused on real estate development, we could potentially price out residents who have been longtime community members by just building new housing stock. But if we build that new housing stock and invest in other neighborhood amenities that increase and improve their quality of life, attract new residents to the community because of those amenities, and create cleaner and safer, safe meaning health safety spaces by this type of investment, we're transforming community by transforming the people and transforming the place. That's a significant opportunity that I see in addition to the brick and mortar residential home development and anything that contributes to improved commercial enhancements in our neighborhoods.
Grace, are we getting kicked out?
I know. That's
We're here till midnight, right?
All of the events we've been running at the Sculpture Center for this exhibition go over time, and I don't think it's because I'm a bad estimator of how long it takes to do things, but because I think we all want to be respectful of what we're talking about. But I also want to be respectful of our speakers' times, of your time. So I am going to kick everyone out. But before I do, I just really thank you all for coming together to share your opinions and ideas. Thanks all of our wonderful community leaders. That includes you, Shawnee. Thank you. And want to draw your attention to the table there. I know we all have, if you want any more information about what EBC is doing, the hikes, the happy hour hikes, where I'm going to be actually. So there's more information there. There's more information about the Sculpture Center exhibition. And there's also how to download, I have to give a plug for the art, how to download the app where you can view Shawnee's recreation of the Sidaway Bridge right on that street. So, yes. I would love to, because this is...
You know what I realized? You know what I realized, Grace? And I wanted an opportunity to say this. As I looked at all the artists for the Sculpture Center exhibit, there were so many that are in the BBC service area.
Yes.
There's Gwen Garth.
Yes.
There's Vince Robinson. There's Shani. There's, I don't know how far up Kinsman Donald Black and the other Kinsman artists go, but I see that as an opportunity to have more conversations like this with different artists. And I don't believe in restricting participation to just a specific neighborhood. If we have a conversation with Vince Robinson, I would love for you to come, and his project is in Buckeye. If we have another conversation with Shani and the other Slavic Village artists, I would love to be invited back, even though I'm Burton Belcar. I'll sit in the audience. I think we need to cross-pollinate these conversations because our problems and our solutions aren't unique to just Slavic Village and Central Kinsman. We can have struggle Olympics and compare our problems all day, but I guarantee you the solutions that we come up with can blanketly solve some of our different problems. The same solution can apply in Burtonville Car neighborhoods as it could in Slavic Village. So I'm open to having other conversations with other artists. Repeating this one, it's just about space and time and how we can commit to being together and building more rapport.
Yeah, good to know. Good to know. Okay. Sure. Thank you. So there is going to be another artist community event where at Riddall in the Kinsman neighborhood, where two of our artists, Gary Williams and Charmaine Spencer, will be talking about their art, but working through the earth and regeneration at Riddall, where that represents the same symbolic reiteration, but in real form. So that will be September 12th. Yes. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Shawnee's like, she's my manager. And then as part of the Crossroads exhibition, there will be shuttle tours on September 18. Is that the right date? Yes. Where we'll have shuttle buses, free shuttle buses, that will take you to all 12 exhibition sites in Cleveland, where you'll see the artwork in augmented reality on the site. So you can hop on the bus, and some of our artists will be present. I'm sure Shawnee will be, to talk about their work, talk about the community. So, and Gina will be talking about her art in East Cleveland. So we have a lot to offer. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good job, fearless leader. And we worked with that. Yeah, it's you know, my concept. It's not focused so much.